So before we get started, just a few words about the Zoom platform. So you'll see a menu bar on your screen. So you can click the chat button to ask presenters questions and to introduce yourself. Please indicate when you ask questions if there's a panelist or panelist that your question is directed towards. As well, you can see the live captions by clicking the closed caption button on that menu bar. Next slide. So briefly, I want to start by introducing today's presenters. So we have Dr. Elizabeth Liz Davis from the American Institutes for Research, who will be presenting on some recent REL Midwest research. We have Gina Diem, Barbie Martin, and Jared Wilson from the Indiana Commission of Higher Education, and they'll be talking about the 21st Century Scholars Program. We also have Bryce Fair from the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education, who will be talking about the Oklahoma Promise Program. And last but not least, my name is Billy Day, and I'm a researcher at American Institutes for Research. I'm the moderator of today's webinar. And for full disclosure, I'm an early recipient of the Indiana 21st Century Scholars Program, and I owe it to them for where I am today. Next slide. Today's agenda. During the webinar today, you'll learn how states can support college-bound students through comprehensive financial and academic programs. You'll also have time towards the end to ask panelists questions. Next slide, please. So I'll first begin by telling you a little bit about REL Midwest. So REL Midwest is one of the regional educational laboratories and is part of a network of 10 regional educational laboratories funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Educational Sciences, more commonly known as IES. So REL Midwest serves 7 Midwest states: Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Next slide, please. REL Midwest works in partnership with practitioners to conduct applied research and providing training, coaching, and technical support, as well as other engagement activities to help partners really understand and use evidence and research. So REL Midwest works with school districts, state education agencies, and other education serving organizations in the Midwest states. Next slide. So I got ahead of myself there, so you'll see this as well. We work a lot with practitioners to really make sure that they understand how to use research and evidence in the work that they do. Next slide. So to address the priorities and interests of our states, REL Midwest supports 5 research alliances and a networked improvement community, as well as other emergent partnerships. So the topics often include teacher preparation, achievement gap, career readiness, early childhood education, and knowledge utilization. Next slide. So I'll briefly introduce our first speaker. So Dr. Elizabeth Liz, commonly known Davis, is a senior researcher at American Institutes for Research. Dr. Davis's areas of expertise include college access and readiness and experimental design. She has led several applied research studies for REL Midwest, including recent research on the impact of school-wide college access programs and the association of dual enrollment in high school and early college success, college enrollment among rural Indiana high school graduates, and predicting early college success using data from the Indiana State Longitudinal Data System. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this presentation over to Dr. Davis to review the research.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm trying to get rid of my chat box and it doesn't want to let me. Uh-oh. And I'm getting ahead of myself. And I don't want to close out. Yes, I will start my video.
Hey Liz, this is Emily. Looks like you are all set from our end. We're just seeing your video and the slides.
Okay, okay. I think I'll be all right now. It's very small. Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you, Billy, for the introduction. Like she said, my name is Liz Davis. I am a senior researcher with REL Midwest, and I'm really excited to be here today presenting to all of you on some work that we have recently been doing in Indiana. There we go. So most high school students are around 96, 97%, when asked, report that yes, they do plan to go to college. This question has been asked of high school students over and over for a few decades now, and the answer is always pretty much the same. But their aspirations for higher education, though, don't always match reality. Only about 2/3 of high school graduates continue on to college, but this percentage has been slowly rising in recent years. And for those that do enroll, only about 60% graduate with a 4-year degree on time, and less than 30% graduate with a 2-year degree on time. These figures are even lower, actually, for students who are in need of remedial or developmental education. So to address these pretty concerning issues, Indiana has made several policy changes over the last decade or so, maybe 15 years or so, including they've increased the rigor of their high school curriculum with the Core 40 curriculum. They mandated that all high schools in the state offer at least two dual credit courses and 2 AP courses. They revised their method for remedial education placement in colleges, and they've really improved their transparency with or through the College Readiness Dashboard, which provides college readiness and success data for Indiana high school graduates. A few years ago, we at REL Midwest conducted a study in partnership with the Indiana Commission for Higher Education to look at what high school students and school level predictors were associated with success in the early years of college. And we did so using the 2010 cohort of Indiana high school graduates who enrolled in a public Indiana 2 or 4-year colleges. So now practitioners and policymakers in the state were interested in revisiting this study with a more recent cohort of students, and we're also interested in exploring the role of receiving financial aid and what role that plays in college readiness and success. So we focus particularly on 2 types of financial aid, Pell Grants and 21st Century Scholarships. Pell Grants is as everyone probably knows, is a federally funded financial assistance program available for students from low-income households. The requirements are that you must fill out a FAFSA and be eligible for financial aid. For example, you have to be a U.S. citizen. The grants provide on average about $3,700 per year. The maximum for this academic year was about $5,900. And then to stay eligible, students need to make satisfactory academic progress each year, and that definition varies by the institution in which they're enrolled. 21st Century Scholarship is an Indiana state program that is open to income-eligible students. I'm not going to go very deep into this because Gina is going to talk about this a little bit later, but students apply in middle school and they participate in the program throughout high school and into college. The scholars must meet academic goals and throughout high school and receive college readiness supports. And as part of their program, they receive full tuition at public Indiana colleges. And in some circumstances, their college of enrollment waives other fees as well. So I just wanted to show you in Indiana, this diagram shows that for the 2014 cohort of Indiana high school graduates who enrolled in a 2 or 4-year public Indiana college in the fall immediately after high school graduation, which that was our sample, there is a lot of overlap between these 2 types of financial aid. So with this diagram shows you is that most 21st century scholars, about 85% of them, also received a Pell Grant. But it's not true for the other way around. So there is a lot of overlap there, and we accounted for that in our method. So we had 2 research questions for this study. First, we wanted to know among our sample what percentage of students achieved early college success, and I will define this in a minute. This has nothing to do with early college, high school. It's a term that we use to describe the set of outcomes. And then we wanted to know how these percentages varied by student and school level characteristics, and we wanted to know if the percentages varied by whether students received different types of financial aid. For research question 2, we wanted to know the association between these different types of financial aid and college success, while accounting for other students and school level characteristics that may also be related to college success. So how did we define early college success? There were 3 measures, and they're composites. They were dichotomous measures, either you got them or you didn't. The first was taking only non-remedial coursework during the first semester, and we measured this for everyone, but we reported it only among the 2-year college students, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Our second measure was earning all attempted credits in the first semester, and the third was persisting to a second year or showing up and being enrolled in the fall of 2015. And then a composite of all 3 of them. So again, we had a sample of almost 30,000 students. I wanted to again point out our criteria, which was very strict. They had to be students who graduated from an Indiana high school in 2014 and had enrolled in a public 2- or 4-year college in the fall of 2014. So we recognize that there are students who that could be part of this sample, but didn't fall directly into those 2 categories. So this may not be reflective of the entire population of these students. Just keeping that in mind. One more down. There we go. So for our methods, research question 1, we use descriptive statistics, just calculating percentages, and we use data from the Indiana Management Performance Hub. And for research question 2, we use a stepwise regression model to account for the overlap between Pell and 21st century scholarship recipients. That is, we added these variables in one at a time to better understand their unique contribution to the regression model. So what did we find? So first of all, in keeping with what we found in the last report, students who entered 4-year colleges saw a higher rate of success than students in 2-year colleges. The 2-year, this is really small on my screen, but 2-year colleges, students enrolled in 2-year colleges are represented by the blue bars. Those enrolled in 4-year colleges represented by the green bars. And again, we did not report on those taking a remedial education for the 4-year colleges because there was such a small number of students taking a remedial ed by then in the 4-year colleges because of the reform that they did with remedial education. So most of it was in the 2-year colleges. Success definitely varied by students' demographic characteristics, and I'm going to just highlight a couple of them here. First off, in 2014, there were a few different types of diplomas that a student could earn. Some students, very few at this point, were earning general diploma, which was the least rigorous of the three. Most students earned a Core 40 diploma, which was reflective of the Core 40 curriculum that was passed. And then some earned honors diplomas, either IB or academic or technical honors. And I think that the interesting finding here is the difference between the Core 40 and the Core 40 with honors. It's pretty stark, but both among the 2 and the 4-year students, if you look, Core 40 earned a Core 40 diploma is in blue, and the honors diploma is in green. And it looks like the rate of early college success for those with honors diplomas is much, much higher than the other two. Same story with taking an AP exam. It seems that students didn't necessarily need to pass their AP courses to achieve early college success at a higher rate, but simply taking the course was enough to make a difference over those who didn't take any. And we have seen this. We've done several college readiness studies for REL Midwest, and we see that almost every time in different circumstances. This next slide, this is for the difference between rural and non-rural schools, and this is really just to show that there's really no difference in success between rural and non-rural high schools. It just shows that rural high schools are doing really just as well as others in the state. And then finally, we come to receiving financial aid. So this is our regression model. To read this graph, and I'm happy to answer questions about it later, but so the line is at 0, meaning no change in the probability of achieving success. If the bar is below the line, and the gold bars are any financial aid, the blue bars are student received a Pell Grant, and the green bars are student received a 21st century scholarship. So that's the color scheme. So if the bar is below the line, this means that receiving that kind of financial aid decreased the student's probability of achieving success. And if the bar is above the line, this means that receiving that kind of financial aid increases the probability of achieving success. So as you can see from this graph, most of the blue bars, which are receiving students who received a Pell Grant, are below the line, and most of the green bars are above. So what this means is that those who received a Pell Grant but not a 21st century scholarship were less likely to achieve success. And those who received a 21st century scholarship, regardless of whether they also had a Pell Grant, were more likely to achieve success. So that's our big takeaway. So what does this all mean? Students, like we saw, and we've seen time and time before, students from disadvantaged backgrounds and those entering two-year colleges really have lower rates of early college success than their peers. Something very interesting that we found for remedial coursework, as I said before, Indiana revised the way they identified students in need of remedial education. So from the original study that we conducted with the 2010 cohort to now, with a 2014 cohort, we saw a very large drop in the percentage of students taking remedial coursework, almost half. We only report it for the two-year schools, like I said, since by this time, most of the remedial education classes were provided only at the two-year colleges. But we didn't see a commensurate increase in students earning all their credits or persisting to a second year. So what this indicated to us is that this change is reflective more of the policy change for identifying remedial education or those in need of remedial education, rather than an overall increase in college readiness. So Pell Grant recipients, like we said before, were less likely to achieve early college success than their non-Pell Grant receiving counterparts. But household income is associated with educational success at all levels of education, from pre-K through graduate school. And since receiving a Pell Grant is really a proxy for coming from a low-income household, our findings are not entirely surprising. Lower-income students may really benefit from programs like the 21st Century Scholarship that have an academic requirement, as well as a program that provides college readiness support in addition to tuition assistance. And as the results suggest, receiving a 21st Century Scholarship was positively associated with early college success, where receiving only a Pell Grant was actually negatively associated. And we see this relationship with Pell recipients throughout the country. Entities like the Education Trust have recently come out with recommendations for ways in which colleges can better support their Pell Grant recipients, such as promoting an inclusive culture, requiring academic advising, and taking the time to better understand and mitigate the barriers to success that these students are facing. And just to wrap up, I always you got to talk about the limitations of your study, and they have mostly to do with our generalizability. It's definitely good things to keep in mind. Our sample, again, only included those who enrolled in a public Indiana college, so any generalizability beyond the states, I would caution generalizability. The measure that we used for persisting to a second year of college did not include those who transferred out of Indiana to go to an out-of-state college past their first year. So those percentages may be a little bit lower, but not too much lower, because we weren't able to merge with any National Student Clearinghouse data to capture those students who went out of state. And then this, again, only included students who enrolled in college in the fall of 2014. So we didn't capture any student who might have joined after the halfway through the semester, or took a year off, or took a semester off. And again, there's a lot of factors that can be determinative of early college success, and we were limited to the data that are available through the Management Performance Hub. So we didn't measure all of those factors. And finally, this is, there's an inherent limitation to correlational studies. They can't detect causal relationships, but they do allow us to figure out what might warrant further study. So that is my time, and I thank you for your attention, and I will hand it back over to Billy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. So briefly, let me introduce. Let me go ahead and briefly introduce our next speakers. We have Gina Diem, who is the Director for Research and Analytics at the Indiana Commission of Higher Education, also known there as the data person, and you'll see why shortly. We also have Barbie Martin, who is the Director of School and Community Outreach for the 21st Century Scholars Program, and in a former role was the 21st Century Scholars Regional Outreach Coordinator in the Southwest region of Indiana. And last but not least is Jared Wilson, who's the Director of Postsecondary Outreach and Career Transitions. And in a former role as well was a Regional Outreach Coordinator for the East region of Indiana. So I'll turn it over now to Gina, Barbie, and Jared to talk more about the 21st Century Scholars Program.
Hi, everyone. You've already heard a little bit about the 21st Century Scholar Program, but we want to give you a little more background. It was established in 1990 to help income-eligible Hoosier students pay up to 4 years of tuition at eligible Indiana institutions. And what that means, obviously, is a public institution, but we do pay partial tuition at private and proprietary institutions as well.
And just in full disclosure as well, I actually am a graduate of the 21st Century Scholarship Program as well, so I'm an alum with Billy Joe. And so wanted to also, I'm where I am today partially because of this program as well. So a few more enrollment requirements. These have changed slightly over the 26, 27 years that we've been around, but in order to enroll in the 21st Century Scholarship Program, they have to enroll in 7th or 8th grade. And they have to be enrolled in a high school or middle school that is public or private, but it has to be accredited by the state of Indiana Department of Education. They have to be Indiana residents. They have to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. And then they also have to meet some eligibility requirements in terms of income. And we base those guidelines on the free and reduced lunch guidelines. So they don't have to be in the free and reduced lunch program, but they have to be eligible for it.
There are some requirements to get the scholarship beyond being income eligible. These are the current requirements. You're going to see a little later some changes that have happened through the history. But for students right now who are graduating, going into college, they have to have at least a 2.5 cumulative GPA, and that is on a 4-point scale. They have to file the FAFSA their senior year by the state deadline, which is April 15th for Indiana. They must earn a minimum of a Core 40 diploma. There are honors diplomas that count as well, but Core 40 is the minimum. And they have to complete the Scholar Success Program, which we'll show in more detail later, but that includes a pledge of good citizenship.
And then once they hit the college level, it's not just like, here's your money, go ahead and go to college. They do still have to continue doing, meeting some basic requirements there currently. So they do have to continue filing FAFSA by our state deadline, which is April 15th of each year. They have to earn at least 30 credits per year. There are some ways around that. If they took some dual credits in high school, or there's what's called a bank. So if they don't hit that 30, they can pull them from that. And then they also have to maintain SAP or satisfactory academic progress on the college campuses. Some legislation was actually just passed in Indiana about a month ago, where we are looking into a college level Scholar Success Program. So we don't have a lot of information about that right now, but there would be some additional requirements that are probably going to take effect in the next couple of years.
Historically, as we said, the program began in 1990, so it was established legislatively at that point. In 1995, the first cohort of 21st Century Scholars actually enrolled in college. So since they enroll in 7th or 8th grade, there was that lag in between the establishment and the first college cohort. You can see there's not a lot changed with the program for several years between 1995 and 2001, but in 2011, we created the Scholar Success Program to address some of the issues that students were having with being successful in college. Then in 2012, Scholar Corps was launched on 10 campuses, 17 currently, to help college-level scholars with any kind of obstacles they might find on those campuses. They were a source of support, information, mentorship to those students on those campuses.
In 2013, we created the credit completion requirements for all state financial aid recipients, not just 21st Century Scholars. So another large state program we have is called the Franco-Bannon Grant, and they have to complete at least 24 credit hours a year. As a 21st Century Scholar, they have to complete 30 credits. In 2014, we deployed some college success coaches around the state on 25 Indiana campuses. And then in 2015, it's the first year that high school graduates had to have that 2.5 GPA. And we also launched an AmeriCorps Vista program in 6 communities around the state to help in the high school and middle school side of things. And then last year, the class of 2017 was the first high school class that was required to complete the Scholar Success Program in order to be eligible for the scholarship once they got to college.
I know it's a little small to see, but here you can see the basic graphic. There are 12 total activities, 3 each year of high school, and they're all designed to help students plan, prepare, and pay for college. Some of these are things students would be doing anyway, like I said, filing the FAFSA that's required for financial aid as a senior, submitting an application to college. Others are more activity-based, participating in extracurricular activities, getting workplace experience, and then others are videos that are just simply informational, trying to provide students with as much information going into college as possible.
So just a little bit about the program impact and statistics. There are over 100,000 students that are currently enrolled in the program from 7th grade all the way through college, and even they have 8 years from activating their scholarship to actually be able to use it. So that goes into those 8 years after high school. About 20,000 students are using the scholarship each year. We give out, or last year, we gave out $161 million in 21st Century Scholars funds to cover tuition and fees. And then since the program has been implemented, we've had over 85,000 total students that have received the scholarship, and over $1.3 billion has been $1.3 billion have been distributed to cover tuition and fees for students. So it's a large bipartisan movement from the state to continue keeping this program going.
In the pilot year, the Scholar Success Program, this is where we landed at the end. You can see the individual percentages for each of the activities. You can see that the junior and senior level activities proved to be more challenging for some students. Probably the most difficult was taking SAT, ACT. There was a lot of resistance with that with students who are going to community colleges who didn't require an SAT or ACT, but the scholarship, the legislation requires that they take it to earn their scholarship. On that, those students are eligible for a fee waiver to take that test, and so there is no fee to them, no cost to them to take the SAT or ACT. It's just about the experience of it. You can see a county by county breakdown. We ended at 67% statewide for completing all 12 activities. As of yesterday, we are at 58% statewide, which is actually ahead of pace for where we were at this time last year. So hopefully that will keep trending that way. We'll actually end with a higher percentage this year in our second year than we did with the pilot year.
And students have until June 30th to complete the activities.
Yes.
Here's a little bit of historical context. So in the past, students only had to complete what was called a student or senior affirmation once they graduated, so 2010 through about 2014. Then we started seeing the 2.5 GPA in 2015, the requirement hit there. And then in 2017, that's when the Scholar Success Program hit, and we're seeing an upward trend, and it's actually continuing upward this year. As Barbie was saying, we're already at 58% who have completed those Scholar Success Program activities for this year, and we still have a couple months before they're required to be completed. So we did see a little drop there, but based on historical context, they're doing more activities and still succeeding and still completing at pretty high rates.
And then after eligibility, in terms of being qualified for receiving the scholarship, to see how scholars are doing once they get into college, we match our K through 12 data to our college enrollment data to look how students are performing. And when we look at scholars compared to low-income students, they're much more likely to enroll in college. Scholars in the 2015 cohort, 81% of them enrolled in college within 1 year of graduation, compared to 39% of low-income students, and those who aren't scholars but qualified for free and reduced lunch. Likewise, they're more likely than low-income students to also earn higher GPAs, more likely to persist to their second year, and are actually also more likely to complete a degree on time. So compared to low-income students, scholars are doing very, very well. Then we also compare those students to the overall student population. And one thing that we have noticed is that by far for college access, scholars are beating everyone, all Indiana students as well as low-income students. But once they trickle into college, we see sort of the gap in terms of success narrow a little bit. For GPA and retention, it's always within 1 to 3 percentage points from the overall below, but then once we got to completion, the gap was about 5 to 7 percentage points lower than the overall average. However, we have seen the most recent improvement with our scholars with some recent policies that have went through. For instance, with the change to the policy requiring students to complete 30 or more credit hours, we have seen a 15 percentage point increase in the percentage of students who are completing 30 or more credits in that first year. And now the scholars actually outpace the general population with regards to that. So as those cohorts begin to trickle into completion, we're going to see some significant progress. And already we've seen a 7 percentage point increase in on-time completion rates for scholars at both of our sectors. And again, with this push to now have college level SFP activities, that's going to help this as well. So I'm talking about outreach a little bit. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay.
In order to help students, I say statewide, you know, Jared gave that number, 100,000 students statewide from 7th grade to college level scholars. We have a regional outreach staff. You can see the color-coded regions. Marion County is a single county region just simply because it's the most densely populated. The others are fairly equal, even though they may not look that way. So we have 8 regional outreach coordinators that work directly for the commission who live in those areas and work with schools and students there. We have 4 outreach office staff members, Jared and myself and 2 others. And then we have the Scholar Corps members I mentioned on the campuses, the VISTA members. We have scholar ambassadors and alumni who are former 21st Century Scholars who volunteered to work with the program. And then we mentioned the college success coach just before.
That's what you're right. And then we also obviously partner with our K-12 schools, colleges, lots of community partners around the state. We have several college success coalitions, which are groups of people in individual counties that are working together to promote college success. And then we obviously partner with a lot of state agencies like the Department of Education and Workforce Development and those other agencies around the state.
These next couple slides we'll go through very, very quickly because our time's running out. But we do have some things that we promote, that we encourage partners, our staff to do statewide. We have Scholar Success Days, labs. In a lot of schools, upperclassmen help underclassmen. In some schools, the performance goals are part of counselor evaluations, which has really helped increase those numbers. You can see here is an example. We did actually just this past weekend did this event again, Scholar Success Day in Fort Wayne and all the surrounding counties, and we had almost 1,000 students and their parents then who came to this event.
And also, we provide a lot of data dashboards on our website, as well as scholar scorecards for counselors and community partners to go in to see for their county and their individual school how students are doing and meeting these activities along the way. And we also, again, post these rates comparing scholars, non-scholars, low income, and all Indiana students through some of those entering college metrics and during college metrics, and available at the school and county and state level. And more information is also provided on our website in terms of data resources. So now we're going to turn it back over to Billy.
Thank you, Gina, Barbie, and Jared. So I'll now introduce Bryce Fair. So Bryce is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Scholarships and Grants at the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education. He'll provide an overview of the Oklahoma Promise program. I'm going to now turn it over to Bryce. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you, Billy. So real quickly, our requirements for the Oklahoma's Promise program are pretty straightforward. Students have to enroll in the 8th, 9th, or 10th grade. The income at that time is across the board of $55,000 adjusted gross income. That's not adjusted for family size. There's a 17-core curriculum that's required and a 2.50 GPA in that core and overall. There is a 22 ACT requirement, but that's only required for homeschool students and students attending non-accredited schools, which is a very small proportion of our participants. There are some conduct standards, attendance, criminal or delinquent acts, substance abuse. Again, that affects a very small portion of our students. Students do have to begin attending college within 3 years of high school graduation. We have a second income check when students start college at 100,000 AGI. Beginning this fall, that will be checked every year in college for each of our participants. And they must also meet federal SAP standards. Our scholarship does pay the actual college tuition, but it does not include fees. Our award is a little more modest than the 21st Century scholarship. We do pay for only the actual hours enrolled, and we do not have a minimum enrollment required. We do see students averaging about 26 hours a year. It's higher for those at our research institutions, lower at our community colleges. Scholarship's good for up to 5 years or the completion of a baccalaureate degree, and that is 5 consecutive years. And again, beginning this fall, we'll be implementing also a cap on the number of credit hours for which the scholarship will pay in college, being set at 129 with some automatic exceptions for degrees that require more than that. Briefly, our history, we started a couple years after Indiana did. Initially had a $24,000 income limit, stayed there until 1999 when it was increased to $32,000. And just 1 year later, it was increased to $50,000 was when the participation in the program really grew dramatically. At that point, $50,000 equated to about 60% of Oklahoma's families. So participation grew dramatically. 2007, our legislature agreed to implement a dedicated funding process that virtually guarantees full funding for the program, which is extremely important, especially in the last few years. Over the past 3 years, higher education funding in Oklahoma has been cut 20%, but this program has been spared that and fully funded. And then just last year, they did finally increase the income limit modestly to $55,000, and it's to go to $60,000 in a couple of years. Some of our data on the high school enrollment, you can see that grew dramatically between 2001 and 2012, especially beginning in 2003 when it was increased to 50,000, hitting a high water mark in 2012 of about 10,600 in that graduating class of 2012. Has declined since that. We expect those numbers to kind of stay flat until 2020 when those coming in at the higher income limit will start entering college. The completion rate, again, these are somewhat similar to what you see in Indiana. Between 65 and 70% of our students that complete those high school requirements to be eligible for the scholarship. It's steadily increased the last 5 years from 65% to over 71%. When we look at their average GPAs, about a 3.4 very consistently over the years on their overall GPA, 3.3 in those 17 core courses, compared to about a 3.0 overall for all Oklahoma high school graduates. Our demographics, by ethnicity, those that qualify for the scholarship really compare pretty equitably to our minority populations in Oklahoma, just about right on percentages for Hispanic, African American, a little bit low for American Indian, which is a large portion of our population here. Gender-wise, very consistently, we see about 60% of our students qualifying for the scholarship are female, 40% male. At the time of application, that differential is about 55-45, but females complete at a higher rate than males, so we consistently see this 60-40 split. Geographically, historically, the program's been disproportionately rural in participation, though that's changed significantly over the last few years. Until now, it's getting much more closer to reflecting our populations in the rural versus urban areas, but though it's still slightly disproportionately rural. The percentage of our students that are Pell Grant recipients, again, the current number is very similar to Indiana. We're at just under 80%. That dropped as far as 55% when we started adding middle-income families back when it was first raised to $50,000. Since that income limit hadn't increased, the percentage of Pell eligibility went up fairly steadily the last few years. These are the number of actual scholarship recipients each year for the past several years. Again, you can see the number of participants receiving the scholarship increased, doubled between 04-05 and 10-11, has declined about 10% or 12% actually in the last few years. Again, we're projecting that to stay steady until 2020 when we expect to see modest increases again with the higher income limit. Our average scholarship, you can see at our 2 years, our regional universities, research institutions. Our most current year, it's pretty much been equalized at our research and regional universities at about $4,500 on average. It's about $1,800 at our community colleges, but the average award has increased about 5% per year as tuition increases. Our overall cost for the program, again, this was a real concern on whether or not the state would be committed to funding the program as it grew dramatically from 03-04 to 11-12. And 2007 was when they put that statutory funding process into place, which actually sets aside money before our legislature comes into session, and that's set aside for the scholarship, so it's not dependent upon annual legislative appropriations. In college, high rates of direct college going with students that qualify for the scholarship, consistently about 80% compared to about half that for non-Oklahoma's Promise students. Where do they go? They don't congregate at any particular type of institution. About 70% are at our regionals or public two-year colleges. About a quarter are at our research institutions. We have a relatively small private college sector in Oklahoma that's about 6%. They do consistently have higher full-time enrollment rates compared to non-Oklahoma's Promise students. We see that each year. Again, even though we don't require a minimum amount of enrollment, most students do go full-time. On this measure, we don't see that much of a difference in when we look at their GPAs as freshmen in college. They're generally just slightly higher than non-Oklahoma's Promise students. So as far as GPA, we don't see that big of a difference. It's more in persistence and graduation and enrollment patterns. Persistence to the second year, again, very consistent when compared to non-Oklahoma's Promise students, about a 10% differential there. And this is when we get to kind of our ultimate measures, especially in talking with our legislature here. What are the degree completion rates? This is measuring the first associate or bachelor's degrees earned by the students participants. At the bottom, you can see the 5-year rate at the end of the scholarship period. And they're about 6 percentage points higher than non-Oklahoma's Promise students to complete a degree in that period. Since most of our students are at our state system institutions, we are able to track them out well beyond that 5-year period. And we do find consistently that a pretty significant percentage go ahead and earn an associate or bachelor's degree within the 5 years after their scholarship period. So we're able to show the legislature that over the long term, close to 60% of these students will complete a college degree, an associate or bachelor's degree, which is helpful in trying to keep this program fully funded. And this is kind of the ultimate question we get in Oklahoma, is how many of these students stay in Oklahoma after they graduate college? A lot of concern about them going out of state. And what we're able to show them is, again, it's not a huge difference, but a consistent slight difference of more of our Oklahoma's Promise students staying in Oklahoma after they graduated from college. The latest year, we had about 88% 1 year after college graduation compared to 85% of non-Oklahoma's Promise students. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Liz, Gina, Barbie, Gina. Oh, Gina's in there twice. Jared and Bryce. Thank you for an excellent overview. So we've had several questions come in from the audience. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first question that we have is, what can you say about the reason students leave college before completion? And this is open.
This is Barbie at the Commission in Indiana. You can look at the research. There's all kinds of things that cause that. Financial reasons are one of those things, and just providing a scholarship doesn't necessarily alleviate that. But for a lot of students, especially our 21st century scholars who are often first-time college students, other social dynamics, family dynamics play a big role in that for these students as well.
Yeah, I work on the college level. Barbie works more on the K-12 level, but I think that anecdotally what we see a lot is it's not that the students don't have the funding. I think that helps them get to school, but having the on-campus support and knowing what resources are there, what keep them in school, and then when one thing happens or goes wrong, to be able to have the support system around them on the campus to actually say, you got a flat tire, we're going to figure it out so you can continue coming to school, or you can't pay rent this month. There are additional things that might help that or whatever it is. But I think it's a lot of things. There's not really one silver bullet to say, if we have this, all students will stay in school and graduate on time or even on part-time.
Thank you. Another question that is sort of secondary to that, what are some strategies to build college readiness in K-12 that you've found?
Well, we mentioned, the Scholar Success Program. One thing I didn't mention during the regular presentation, it was initially rolled out just for 21st century scholars. It's required for them. But now in the last couple of years, it's being branded as required for scholars, but recommended for all. And a lot of our high schools, particularly in things like college and career readiness classes, those kinds of things, in certain government classes, certain English classes, they take part of that Scholar Success Program and actually use them with all students. So we're hoping that some of those recommended activities can be more broadly used and hopefully start to see better preparation for all students.
Thank you. And then this question is for both Bryce as well as Barbie, Jared, and Gina. What about DACA students or Dreamers? Are they eligible for the scholarship?
In the state of Indiana, actually DACA students are not eligible for any state financial aid, unfortunately, regardless of whether it's 21st century scholars, Franco-Bannon, or anything else. They have to be eligible non-citizens, and in Indiana that does not include DACA students.
That's the same in Oklahoma, and I think it was also in 2007 we had legislation that required students to be U.S. citizens or, in the statutory language, lawfully present, which they've interpreted not to include DACA students.
Thank you. Bryce, this question is for you. So what percentage of high school grads will qualify for the Promise program, given the income limit in Oklahoma?
Right now, it's about 20% that end up qualifying for the program. And when we look at our incoming direct from high school to college students enrolling in our state system schools, they're also about 20% of our incoming freshmen.
Perfect. Thank you, Bryce. So another question that we received is, what have you seen about providing both formative and summative feedback to students? Do you have any recommendations for best practices?
Can you provide any clarification on that question, or I know putting you on the spot there, Billy Joe.
No, that's totally fine. So the question again was, what have you seen about providing both formative and summative feedback to the students? and I'm going to take this to mean university students, and I'm also going to take this to mean, you know, because I'm going to take that liberty, I'm going to take this to mean the students who are in the Scholars Program or the Oklahoma Promise Program. We are requiring a lot more of the students. Do we provide them feedback that helps them sort of move through this process in a constructive way?
So from the state side of things, specifically with Scholar Track and the Scholar Success Program, the feedback that they really receive, really, it's more of a tracking system for us. And so the feedback they would receive would be from the high school guidance counselors, and then from a college level. A lot of our campuses actually have 21st Century Scholar or offices on their campus that provide coaching and academic advising. And so I think that from a state level, it's hard to answer that question because we don't necessarily interact one-on-one with the students quite as much as those on-campus supports. But if whoever asked that question is interested in our finding out more information, they can shoot us an email, and we're happy to provide more information. I don't know if Bryce has any on his side of things there.
Now, at the state level, we really don't have anything near the infrastructure that Indiana has as far as state-funded or organized. We really depend heavily on the local high schools, the counselors, as well as the existing programs like Gear Up, Talent Search, Upward Bound. Now, our requirements, kind of like Indiana, our 17 core required courses are aligned with our college admission requirements for our state system institutions, as well as the college high school graduation requirements for the curriculum they call career college ready curriculum. But other than that, we don't have a lot of direct feedback to students.
Thank you. So we have another question. So here the person is saying that they are college and career coordinator, and they would like to know, how do you get students to engage in your program, and how do you keep them engaged once they're in the program?
With Indiana, it actually looks a lot of different ways with the different partners and things that we talked about. In some schools, they have dedicated staff members, usually in the counseling department, that work with nothing but 21st Century Scholars, and they meet with them in small groups, and they meet on a regular basis. Others have our outreach staff come into the school, and we meet with students in big groups. We have the Scholar, Success Days, those kinds of things. But in between all that, we have email communications that go out, phone communications, postcards. So, and we also have guides that are delivered to the schools every year for the students to take home that are grade specific, to take home to their families. And so we try to reach out in a variety of ways because it is a large program, it is statewide, and there are so many students to reach. With the community partners, we work really well with a lot of the big programs like Big Brothers Big Sisters, things like that. And they work directly with students, either one-on-one or in small groups.
We also have several nonprofits across the state, similar to Big Brothers Big Sisters. One's called Starfish Initiative, that's based here in Indianapolis. That is a mentoring organization that is specifically for 21st Century Scholars. So you have to be a 21st Century Scholar to be part of the program. Another program is called Project Leadership. It's actually in 2 counties up in the northeast side of the state that focuses on 21st Century Scholar enrollment in middle school, and then SSP completion, and they provide mentoring and those types of things as well. And Barbie had mentioned that we do a lot of, emails and texts and phone calls and those things. So
social media.
Yeah, just to give a few numbers, last year we distributed more than 1.5 million print materials. We held over 500 different unique events across the state, had almost 28,000 phone calls that were sent out. And then we sent over 500,000 emails and texts to people. So we try to hit it. We have a very strong communication team here in the commission. And Barbie and I we're on outreach and communications, but we don't do the communication side. But we have a lot of support in that side of things as well.
And from the data standpoint too, we pull those lists of contact information for for instance, senior scholars who haven't filed the FAFSA, we'll pull that contact information, and then that's put in a listserv and all of that to contact students to make sure they're hitting the SSP requirements and also FAFSA deadlines. So we do specific data pools for contact specifically to students for that.
Excellent. So thank you. So this really wraps up all the time that we have for questions today. I would like to thank our presenters again, Liz, Gina, Barbie, Jared, and Bryce. Thank you. If I can get someone to click to the next slide.
Sorry, our computer is a little sleepy, so we will be getting to the next slide in a minute.
Thank you. So in the meantime, while we wait for the next slide to come up, if you are interested in events like this and other publications, you can follow us on Twitter or check out our website at ies.ed.gov, and you can take a look and see what we have to offer. Next slide, please. And lastly, for more information, please feel free to contact us. Our emails are on this page. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. And other than that, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you again for joining us.